get your earballs ready. Welcome to the Greg and Tim Show podcast. Take time to sit back and relax and enjoy the show. Here are your hosts, Greg and Tim.
Welcome back to the Greg and Tim Show. I'm Greg, and here beside me is a special guest today. His name is...
Thanks for having me on, Greg. My name is Tim.
You're not a guest. Why do you want to pretend to be a guest today? Is it because you're sitting in the guest chair?
I'm happy to finally be sitting down with you after all of these weeks.
So we're having a sit down.
Yeah.
The reason being is I didn't want to clean it up.
Right.
I didn't want to clean up the podcast room, so I kept it like this. We did an interview last week, and I kept it like this.
Yeah.
So you want me to interview you? Is that what you want?
No, I just...
So Tim... Who is Tim Sanderson?
Tim Sanderson is a guy who's gotten addicted to this.
I wish I had a buzzer. It was like, that's not right.
So Greg gave me this to write notes on, and
just for notes.
And I really like it, so I want to keep this.
But it was just for notes,
so I can.
And you were supposed to put it off to the side, back in the old nerd shed.
I'm going to keep it on my lap for the whole episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So how's it going, Greg?
It's going fantastic. When do we usually roll? Do we usually roll after this, or do we roll after we talk about our week?
Let's talk about what we're going to talk about.
Let's talk about what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, and then we roll. So we're going to say, like, are we talking sports?
I don't know. Let's just roll.
Grab your phone. It's podcast time. It's the Greg and Tim Show. It's the Greg and Tim Show.
So how was your week, Tim? Now that we've rolled, last week we rolled after 15 minutes.
It doesn't matter.
And this time it was like 3, so that's better. There is rules.
My week's been great. It's been so warm in
it's
Winnipeg.
Beautiful here.
I don't know if you're from anywhere else in the country or the States or whatever, but in Winnipeg, we're at the beginning or end of January, early February, and the average highs are like minus 15, minus 12 to minus 15.
Yeah.
And it's been like plus degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
But every day it's like the ice is melting. Taking my dog for walks. It's really, really dirty though.
Yeah, I know. I put a outfit on my dog so that when I get home, I can take the outfit off and he's not dirty.
Yeah.
But the outfit is disgusting.
I'm dodging ice down my street the entire time.
You have ice on your street? I don't have any ice.
Yeah.
It's all water now. It's been plus 6 all week. Plus 6 in Winnipeg, just for people that aren't from Winnipeg. Plus 6 in Winnipeg is very much like it's a 25-degree swing. It's usually minus 25 to minus 30 at this time.
Yeah, well, global warming, right?
I think it's called climate change now. I think they changed it.
No, when it's
warm. I think, what's her name? Greta Van Susteren? Greta Van Wig? What's her name?
Greta Van Winkle?
Greta Van Winkle. She changed it to global, to climate change.
She changed it?
Mm-hmm.
I thought Trudeau might have.
Thunberg.
Thunberg?
Thunberg. She's the one that changed it. So yeah, we're hanging out in the chairs here today. We thought we would, talk about our week, but you haven't even told me about your week other than the fact that it's been warm.
Well, that has enabled me to go for daily walks and loving it.
And you're enjoying every moment.
Yeah, so daily walks with my...
So it is going to get cold.
Yeah, it's going to get... You know what I'm hoping for?
I know. I was just going to say it.
I'm hoping for, like, it gets really, really cold when I leave for my...
your trip.
Which is, today is the 7th on the taping.
Yeah.
We leave on the 20th, so that's less than 2 weeks, 13 days.
Yeah.
I got a flight to San Francisco early morning on the 20th, so really not even that day.
So we have this podcast.
Yeah.
And next week's podcast, providing that I don't kill you this week. And then we have some awesome interviews that we're going to broadcast while we're on vacation that we've been working on for the last couple of weeks.
So just in case everyone is understanding, when they don't see us on a podcast in this scenario when we're talking to each other and this lovely banter, it's not because you killed me.
They're still going to see us. Oh, no, yeah. Wait, I didn't kill you.
like the two of us, together in an episode where we're actually talking
just the two events, of us,
right? Just the two of us. It's not because I've deceased.
No.
It would be because
you've passed.
We're on hiatus. I'm going on holidays.
Yeah.
And you, my friend, I'm so pumped because you have not been to your old stomping grounds in Florida because you have a family member that lives or part-time out there, right?
Well, my parents live there in the winter and my in-laws are there.
So you guys used to go very regularly and you would even
We went 6 years in a row.
Yeah. So when we went to Florida, you guys were like, oh, you go to this pizza place.
Yeah.
And you go
Little
to
Anthony's.
Little Anthony's.
Shout out Little Anthony.
You go to this donut place. It was
Donut King.
And of course, you go to this church, which was
real life
in Claremont, Florida. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
I should be pointing at the single camera.
We've done that.
Point at that one.
And we went to all those places and the funny thing is we went in January of 2021.
And you loved it.
And it was Florida, right? So when Winnipeg was infamously being locked down in our basements.
Yeah.
I was out there and loving it.
Were you?
Yeah. Living life.
So every one of my suggestions was a good one?
Yeah. For the most part we think alike. So
yeah, you didn't like pizza as much as I do.
But I have family members that like it, and they had I think they had a cauliflower crust one that
did they?
Right? Yeah.
So like one that was
By the way, just a little bit of a thing about cauliflower crusts.
Okay.
They're not all equal.
I've never had one.
Like I think Pizza has I don't want to. Maybe I shouldn't say this.
You're not going to rag on Pizza.
And I'm sure they're not the only one, but it's like, here's a healthy cauliflower pizza, which is smaller and more expensive, and it's like 2% cauliflower.
And it's more expensive.
It's more expensive, and it's really like a tiny little bit, so they can call it cauliflower crust.
Yeah.
There's a couple of drops of cauliflower in there, apparently. And it's just as bad for you.
But it's gluten-free, right?
Yeah. Does anyone really know what gluten is?
So in 2 weeks, you're going to be gone. Well, less than 2 weeks, you're going to be gone.
Yeah.
Just over 2 weeks, I'm going to be gone. We're trying to get everything done prior to leaving.
Yeah.
Cruz had his birthday last week. We had 12 children running around.
Yeah, you sent an SOS.
I did. Nobody came.
No.
Nobody joined me.
Did not want to do that. No. And then Matthew said that...
And it smelled like somebody had... farted on a truck full of BO down here.
And Matthew and Carlos said, what are you talking about? We had 20 people for our kids' birthday. Yeah. That's nothing. Why are you being such a wuss?
Yeah.
And you were.
Yeah, I guess
let's be face it.
Let's be face it.
Yeah. Before I forget, funny story. Like
Sunday, I doubt you'll forget.
On Sunday, my lovely wife sang in church, and I was able to watch her for a couple of services. She did a great job. And then in the evening, it was so warm. Like the high was +3 on Sunday. We had first of all, we went to Qdoba with our two children that are still in Winnipeg, Taylor and Avery, and we took their boyfriends as well. And then we came back to have a bonfire.
Shout out to Julian, who did sound for us a couple weeks ago.
He did a fabulous job.
You went to Qdoba with them. Sorry, I keep interrupting.
And we were reminiscing about. I don't know if I told you the story about the Qdoba, the 2021 Qdoba adventure with my wife. So do you remember the days in which you, in order to sit at the same table, you had to provide proof that you all
that you were in the same household?
So if anyone doesn't understand this, like if you're in the States, you have no idea what we're talking about. There was a time in Manitoba or Canada in general where you actually had to prove you lived in the same household to sit at the same booth.
It was very dystopian.
Yeah, for during the time we don't talk about. And so my wife and I went to Qdoba.
Yeah.
And I had my ID and she forgot hers at home.
Yeah.
And they're like, nope. So it was so funny because I sat in this booth and my wife sat in the booth like just literally
right beside you,
2 feet away.
And you left and came with each other.
And we left and came with each other.
Oh my goodness!
So we laughed, and she did not laugh. But anyway.
And then I also had Brandon and Allie's anniversary dinner on Sunday, so that was great. We're not anniversary, engagement. They didn't get it. They haven't been married yet. Engagement dinner, so we're celebrating.
Well, they celebrated their 1 week engagement.
I think it's been a month and a half.
A month and a half anniversary engagement.
Yeah,
anniversary.
But you have a celebration coming up in 2 weeks, the 21st.
My birthday's on the 21st of February. I turned 48.
Your birthday's on the 21st. We're not going to be here for the taping, unfortunately.
Right.
So I got something for you.
You got me something?
Yeah. I didn't tell you this time because I know you feel bad when I get you something.
Right.
When you don't get me something.
Well, I know.
But now it's your birthday, so
yeah, okay.
I didn't make you feel bad. Billy, behind that box there, is something that's wrapped. Can you pass it to me? So,
all right.
No, not yet, because I know what happens.
That ungrateful so-and-so.
That ungrateful. You're just going to rip it and toss it off to the side. There's going to be wrapping paper everywhere.
Just so everybody knows, I've been very difficult today, pre-taping.
You were wearing white socks that had like paint on them and other...
They didn't have paint on them.
Your white socks actually looked like your shirt.
That wasn't paint, it was blood, first of all. Second of all, I forgot that white was bad.
The paint, your socks actually looked like your shirt, but your shirt was made like that and your socks were not. Anyway, this is something that I hope that you really like. I don't know if you will. It has something to do with the Mandela effect, maybe.
Oh no. So everybody,
you're really excited. It's a Paw Patrol paper.
Paw Patrol paper.
Yeah. Show that camera.
Paw Patrol.
Yeah.
Paw Patrol. Is this my personal camera?
That's just you. That's just me.
Everybody.
They're looking right into your soul.
Good to see you. Ooh, that's not good.
Okay. See if you like it. I don't know if you got this.
It's a book.
It's a book. Yes, you're right.
Oh. 2 minutes for two. Oh, it's a Curt Keilback book.
Yeah.
So I love Curt Keilback.
You were texting me the other day.
Yeah.
That you were like, hey, I love him like I love Sandberg.
I love Curt Keilback. I was so mad when they came back. When they came, I'll get a little close up here. Look at Greg got me for my birthday.
2 minutes for talking to myself, which is what I feel like sometimes on this show.
And there's a picture of Curt Keilback. Jets, Coyotes, Tails, Opinions. I guess those are certain things in the book.
Yeah. It's a very interesting book. It's got a lot of like behind the scenes stories of what happened and Jets history and player history and his history as well. It talks about like it actually talks about why he stopped broadcasting with the Coyotes, which I got to, which was a really good chapter. So
I'm just gonna read this book for the rest of the
You're not gonna read it for the rest of the
episode.
episode.
The beginning.
So Curt Keilback, like, so the people that don't know, because you can throw it wherever you want. You can put it in the middle here if you want. Show it off. For people who don't know who Curt Keilback is, Curt Keilback used to be the voice of the Jets when we were kids.
Yeah, I thought he was. I listened to a bunch of radio guys. I thought he was like one of the best.
Yeah.
Underrated. He was in Winnipeg, so you never got the respect that he kind of deserved.
So did you know that he was the voice of the Jets for 15 years?
Well, yeah, of course.
79 to 94.
Definitely.
And he wasn't the voice for the last 2 years. Do you remember who was the voice?
Munzie?
Nope. Munzie was the voice of the Moose.
And then he was when he came back, I think he was part-time.
He was part-time with the Jets, the new Jets. But who was 95, 96 voice of the Jets?
Tell me.
Kelly Moore.
Oh, yeah, Kelly Moore.
Kelly Moore. And I think he still does some broadcasting stuff. Or he was when TSN 1290 was here. So he was the broadcaster for the Jets from 79 to 94.
Yeah.
And that was from like the first years of the NHL being in Winnipeg, right?
Yeah.
Was that when the Jets started, 79?
Well, they came into the league in 79-80, yeah.
Okay.
And they were the worst team in the league, so 81 they got Howard Chuck. 80-81 they got Howard Chuck.
Do you know why he became a broadcaster?
Nope.
So he was a broadcaster in Regina for the Pats, I believe.
Right.
And his dad worked with Friar Nicholson and who's the other guy? Cactus Jack?
Cactus Jack.
Remember Cactus Jack?
Cactus Jack Wells, I think, is right.
Yeah. Remember the Happy Honker?
Yeah, for the Bombers.
Was that the Bombers? I think it was the Jets.
No, it was the Bombers.
I
remember
sure?
that. Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Anyway, so his dad worked with them.
Yeah.
And I also bought the book.
Yeah.
Just to give a little bit of backstory, because I'm like, I get Tim a mug, I buy myself the same mug. I like to have the same things. But anyway, so I've been reading it, and his dad's nickname was the Kid.
Okay.
Jim Keilback, I believe, the Kid. And so Friar Nicholson said, "Get the kid's kid," or Cactus Jack Wells, one of the two said, "Get the kid's kid."
Yeah,
because he was doing Pats games, in Regina, I believe.
Yeah,
and he thought he was just going to come over and be like a guy that worked with the Friar Nicholson, because Friar Nicholson was the play-by-play guy. He thought he was going to do just some light work, where he ended up doing a lot of the heavy lifting and became the voice.
And then,
what's your favorite? Do you remember favorite calls at all?
Oh, of course. Essence of the say, the Jets have the power play.
Shot
around. Yeah,
shot, save, rebound.
Yeah, and he was so good. And then he wasn't able to, when the Jets came back, like honestly, like no offense to anybody who does radio broadcasting
Play-by-play.
They came back till now in the last 12 years.
Yeah.
They're not as good as Curt Keilback. And it's, again, no offense, it's not even close.
Yeah.
So I'd never understood why he wasn't at least considered to be the voice of the Jets when they came back. I always thought there was some things under the table that happened that neither the book or the organization, as you know, the Jets can be very tight-lipped. They are.
Yeah.
That it's a story that I don't think we'll ever know, but it seemed like something went down.
He does tell the story about why he was let go from the Coyotes,
right,
in the book,
right,
which is very interesting. How that story goes. Just 1 year, he didn't get his contract renewed.
Yeah,
and there's a good story. I won't ruin the whole book for you.
I told you I'd read it here on air, and then they're gonna have
Chapter 1,
2.5 speed.
At 2.5 speed.
Once upon a time. So
sorry, I'm gonna have to answer this, Tim. This is actually the second part of your birthday present.
Oh,
hello there. How you doing?
I think here. Hi,
you are
Tim.
Tim.
Good to meet you. I'm Greg. Good to meet you.
Good to see you.
Tim, this is the second half of your birthday present. We're gonna sit down and Curt Keilback.
Hey, this is good.
We just finished talking about you a ton.
Uh-oh.
Because he just opened up the book.
Oh,
I got the book for him for his birthday.
Oh, wow. Did you find anything positive in there?
Oh, yeah. Lots of questions. Lots of questions.
10 good things, 2 bad things, but hey.
Okay, hey, that's good. Yeah, that's good.
So we're going to sit down and chat with him.
Awesome.
Awesome. So we're going to give Curt the big seat.
Okay.
The big seat.
The big seat. And I'm sure you know how these work.
Yeah.
So this part is got the dot. So that's where you're speaking to.
Okay.
Tim, you got this guy here. You want to be over there?
Yeah.
So let me get my setup done here too. Awesome. So this is fantastic. I'm super excited that you're here because I'm also
glad to be here. Good.
I'm
Good.
also a huge fan because
Right.
I grew up with you on the radio as Tim did.
Yeah.
And this might sound a little weird or creepy or whatever, but I would fall asleep to you calling the play-by-play back in the day. Does that sound weird or creepy?
Yeah, I don't know whether that's flattering or not. I put you to sleep. Well, no, I know.
You didn't put me to sleep.
No, I know. Actually, it's funny. I hear from a lot of people who said that they after bedtime they'd sneak a radio and and listen. And my voice is the last thing they would hear. Yeah. So I think that contributed to the fact that a lot of people your age think highly of me because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, some of the games were late at night, so
the game
if it's in LA,
yeah.
So the 7 game against when Jamnov had those 5 goals, right? That game's not ending till midnight. Well, we're 12 years old.
Yeah,
we're tired.
Well,
right?
you're 12. I'm only 9.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So. We actually talked about you a little bit at the beginning of the show because we were talking about the book and everything like that. So kind of did a quick little introduction, but basically you were the voice of the Jets 15 years, 79 to 94, correct? And you did TV for
and then
years?
I did the last couple of years on TV. So I was with them for 17 seasons, actually.
17 seasons?
CKND, and prior to that, it was CKOI Radio and TV.
Yeah.
And there was CGOB was mixed in there a couple of times too. So
this was all back before TSN and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, I was back when very few games were televised. There was only 16 games a year televised of the Winnipeg Jets, aside from the ones that Hockey Night in Canada did on a Saturday or at playoff time. So there weren't many games on TV. You had to pretty well go to the rink, or the next best thing, I guess, was to listen to the radio. Yeah.
Yeah, the radio, and I remember being a kid, I would actually practice doing play-by-play on my my CD player or tape player or whatever, right? Did you ever do that?
Oh, all the time for sure. I might have taped it a couple of times, but I didn't keep it.
How awesome would it be if we had those tapes right now?
It would be awesome.
Hey, Tammy, can you? No, just kidding.
She can't. They wouldn't be very good.
You know, they never sound quite as good when you're sitting in a room doing a fake play-by-play as they do when you're at the actual rink with the background noise and the goals and the reality of it all. So
yeah,
I always remember in I think it was '86 when we had that big snowstorm and we were playing the Devils that night.
Yeah,
and 500 people could make it to the arena. That it was like every time you made a call, I could hear the puck hit every board. Bing, 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 bing.
Yeah. Oh, that was crazy there. Yeah. George Bazunas was the guy. He was the engineer at the CKY. Had to come and pick me up in his 4-wheel drive, and I had to walk to Portage from where we lived. We lived in Westwood, and he got me to the rink. And then I looked, and I can recall seeing the New Jersey bus didn't make it all the way to the rink, and the players, the Devils got off, and they had to carry their equipment.
Gear?
Oh yeah. And then the final score was 8-1 that night for the Jets.
For the Jets,
yeah.
Well, the Devils were tired.
They were tired. They didn't even know they were going to get here.
They probably took a left turn at the Velodrome back in that time. Oh man, yeah, it's like back in the day, it was a different league and a different culture, essentially, right? Like,
you know, it was a lot different. It was. I think there was a little bit more fun and less business attitude back then because players weren't making $10 million a year. They were making a very good wage, but it was in the hundreds of thousands or sometimes even less.
Yeah.
So it was important that they also got some public relations work in because they'd wind up working for a brewery in a later life or public relations of some sort. And it was just a different feel. And they weren't in the same kind of shape that they are now either. I mean, that's why they called it training camp back in the days, because guys would come to train.
Yeah.
Nowadays, the best shape a hockey player is in all year is when he arrives at training camp. Yeah. Their training, actually, their conditioning decreases over the course of the year because of the flights and the time off in between.
Well, the breakdown and the muscles and stuff like that.
Well, Solani tells the story. He was in an interview recently, and he said when he came to training camp, and he looked around and he said, these guys are professional hockey players. And he would do the drills and he's like, these guys are slow and they're old. And, and he had to be told to slow down. You're going too fast. Some of the veterans, you're showing up some of the veterans, right? What was Solani would you say he was the most electrifying player you called, or was there someone else that you would say you really enjoyed seeing them on the ice?
No, he was easily the most electrifying player in that first year.
Yeah.
In particular, that rookie year, because he was making those rushes going hard to the net and from the outside. The second year after he got hit by Brian Marchment and there was a second hit in there too
in Vancouver, I think.
Mike Pekka was the other guy,
Yeah.
and the two of them both nailed him in the knees. And after that, he was a little more cautious about making those hard charges. He'd get to the blue line and he'd do a little loop.
Yeah.
And wait for a trailer and feed the puck. But that first year, it was headlong to the net every time, and it was great to watch. You know, Glenn Anderson was often famous for making that the suicide rush, they called it.
Yeah.
But Solani made several of them every single game, and every one was exciting as the one before.
Yeah, and you see that these days with guys like Ehlers and even a little bit like with Connor, right? But they don't have the same fear that they used to. We just saw the big hit. I don't know if you watched the game last night.
No, I didn't see it. My television broke down, actually. It's been a strange day at our place.
You could have got to the radio.
Yeah. I broke my bed this morning. The television broke. It's crazy, yeah.
But they didn't have. They had fear back then. Like you said, Solani decided eventually stopped doing it.
Yeah.
Now they have less fear, I think, of that kind of stuff happening.
Yeah,
right?
well, it's not as physical. I mean, I shouldn't say not as physical. It's faster, so when they hit, I guess it hurts more.
Yeah.
But they're a little bit less likely because of the head hit, the things, the suspensions, the fines, and all the rest of it. So it's they take a little better care in that way. But yeah, there were more fights in those days, and it was just a bit rougher game, intentionally rougher. Now it's still rough, but not as meant to be as rough.
Well, plus the fighting is pretty much taken out of the game, right?
The which?
The fighting has been taken out of the game.
Yeah, it's there was a lot of and when there was guys like Jim Kite and Tim Hunter and Dave Semenko, and some of those fights with Jim Kite and Tim Hunter Look forward to those. They were great fights. And, I always get a kick out of people who say, how can you talk about a fight? How can you glorify a fight? Every time those guys fought, everybody in the place was on their feet. You don't tell me we weren't enjoying it. So it was hypocritical for people to say that. They enjoyed it. It was part of the game. It's less a part of the game now, obviously. And that's probably a good thing. But because you'd rather see the speed and stuff, but the fights are pretty exciting too.
I always found it funny when originally when we started trying to get the game into the U.S. and some of these states. Now it's all over the states, but it used to be like we're trying to get these to the Americans to like hockey. Let's get Americans to like the hockey. Let's build the league, and they wanted to take hockey out of the game so that Americans could find hockey interesting. I always thought that was kind of strange. Americans.
Yeah, exactly.
The monster truck nation of the world. I know. We want to eliminate hockey.
I know. Or fighting. It was it was a strange reception in some ways about the fighting part of it. Some people down there really liked it, like say the monster truck mentality and that kind of thing. But I can remember being called to do a radio show one day, and the guy just absolutely attacked me for a half an hour about fighting in the NHL. And I tried to explain why it was going on and that it had been part of the culture of the game forever. He wasn't hearing a word I was saying. So I eventually just sat back and let him do the talking.
Just hang out. I'm going to ask a quick question about play-by-play. Because I was at a Niverville Nighthawks game a couple weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
And do you know Kevin Pauls? Have you heard of him at all?
No.
So he's their play-by-play
guy. I know of him, but I don't know him.
Yeah. So he's their play-by-play guy. He's actually training his daughter right now to do play-by-play as well. So she helps him out on play-by-play, which is really cool. But so me and my kids were at the game, and I got to jump on the headset with him because we were there to promote the game and stuff like that. Me and my kids and my wife were there. And so I was on the headset with him and listening to him call a junior game.
Well, it's probably because his dad donated some venison beef jerky to me yesterday, or venison jerky, so that helped change the luck of things. There's a shot by McCurdy, bouncing puck, and the Pistons come up with it as they work down the left side. Nice move here is
the quickness of how he had to think on his feet. Like I'm trying to think on my feet right now, at how quickly he thought on his feet while the game was going on, knowing all the players, all that kind of stuff. How do you practice for that? Like how do you even get into it?
Well, no, it's actually pretty easy because when you're covered, that's your full-time job.
Yeah.
So when it was a game day, when I was doing the Winnipeg Jets, I would go to the skate in the morning.
Yeah.
And I mentioned it in the book. There's 40 guys on the ice. 20 of them are Jets. So obviously I'm going to know every one of them.
Yeah.
And then the example I gave was if the Edmonton Oilers were coming, well, you're going to know Paul Coffey, and you're going to know Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier. You're going to know who Dave Semenko is, or Ken Lintzman, and maybe Kevin Lowe. You're going to know some of these guys. And so there might be 6 or 7 guys that might cause you to have to look at the program once in a while. But no, that's what people seem to think is the most difficult part, and really it's an easy part. Now, when it is difficult is when you're doing a junior game.
So the paths.
And you've not seen these teams before.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't have names on their jerseys.
Just numbers, yeah.
And if you're doing it in Winkler, by example, and you're sitting at one end, then you can't even see the number because they're coming at you.
Yeah.
So then it's here come the Flyers out of their own zone, because you don't have a clue who has the puck, So you gotta fake
player
it.
A passes to player B.
So,
scores.
Yeah. No, it's really a lot of people seem to think it's difficult, and it's not. Right. I'm sure that if you sat down and broadcast 5 or 6 games at the rink, not in your room here, at the rink, you'd notice after 5 games you're quite a bit better than you
right. And I would think it's like any other job. The first game you ever did was, not as easy as the second one, and it keeps getting easier as you go along. After 10 years of doing it, well, it's like nothing else. It's like putting on a pair of pants.
Yeah.
Or getting out of bed.
I remember when I started, I'd always get a sore throat after a game, and somebody told me because you're straining too much, so I had to be taught that not to do that. And then it got smoother, and then I never had problems with a throat after that.
And you grew up with it, right? Because your dad was he color commentary, or did you?
No, he was play-by-play. He did hockey in Winnipeg with the Winnipeg Warriors back in the day. And he did the Phoenix Roadrunners and the Tucson Mavericks for their 1 year, and he did some play-by-play in Yorkton for the Terriers of the senior days.
Oh, wow.
And there were some pretty good hockey players there at that time too. So I used to listen to a lot of his games, and I joined him a lot of times. I watched Billy Mozayenko when I was a little guy, and had the opportunity to see how he could bring a house down and how exciting it was. And And the crowd counts. My dad always told me that the fire marshal in those days was a real friend of hockey.
Yeah.
And so they far exceeded the limit. Some of those nights when Billy Mosienko and the Winnipeg Warriors were playing for the Edinburgh Cup. So it was fun. And I got to sit with Dad, and I got to sit with Cactus Jack. Cactus Jack was never identified with hockey. But so he would generally have Dad do the play-by-play, and he would provide the color, which was generally humor.
Yeah.
And they had a great time. And I'd sit with them as a kid, and wow, is this ever a great way to make a living? My dad's getting paid for doing this.
Yeah.
And I thought the world of Cactus Jack Wells. In fact, I thought he was my uncle for most of those early days because he and Dad were together a lot. And they just seemed to have a great time, and that's what I decided I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Tell me about the first Winnipeg Jet game that you ever called.
I think it's in the book, right? I think
no, I don't think it is. The first Jet game I ever did was in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
They called it the Broadmoor World Arena, and it was the Colorado Rockies in those days.
Yep.
And Don Cherry was the coach of Colorado, and it was an exhibition game, obviously, and we went down there, and the charter flight left at 3:00 in the morning. I did mention it in my book that I hit a cow on my way to Winnipeg that day, and I showed up to go to this game in a car that was kind of a messed up thing. But anyway, we got on the charter about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Flew to Colorado Springs. It was the first time I'd met Friar Nicholson or John Ferguson or Bill Sutherland and Tom McVie, and first time actually I'd ever seen an NHL hockey game. And at that time, I was doing color. I did color with Friar for the first 3 years. And
you came on thinking you were going to do color, right?
Like, I was hired to do color. I did that for the first 3 years. But then Friar, his health started giving him issues, so they decided to have us trade places. And and Friar was a tremendous color commentator too, because nobody had more stories than Ken Friar Nicholson.
Yeah,
it was always fun to watch him entertain the crowds in different places we went to.
And they said, if I remember correctly, Cactus Jack said, "Get the kid's kid." Right?
Yeah,
that's
why they hired me. Get the kid's kid. Apparently, what had happened is they had invited people to apply for the job as color commentator because the Jets were going from the WHA to the NHL. They got some applicants, and John Cochran and Ken Nicholson, who were listening to the tapes, apparently didn't like what they heard. Yeah. And just the luck of the draw, Cactus Jack happened to be in the building coming in, I guess, for that 5:30 sportscast he used to do. And he said, "What are we going to do?" He said, "Get the kid's kid. He's somewhere in Saskatchewan," is what he said. And next thing I knew, they called me, and I wound up here.
And you were already doing some play-by-play.
No, at that time I wasn't. I was doing television in Yorkton. And I was doing news, sports, weather, commercials, variety shows, anything, but no play-by-play.
So you literally hadn't done a stitch of it, and you just heard your dad do it.
No, I had done it before. I'd done it for 4 years because I had done radio prior to television. And it was a couple of years of senior hockey in Yorkton, and then a couple of years of the Regina Pats, the same team that won the Memorial Cup in 1974 with Dennis Sobchuk and Clark Gillies. And Yeah.
They had a good team.
Oh, they had a great team. Eddie Stanowski was on that team.
That was like calling an NHL game before they made it to the NHL.
Yeah, and and that made it easier for me too, because when I did that first game at the Broadmoor World Arena, I fell back a little bit on some of the people I had seen play.
Yeah.
Who had played in the Western Hockey League against the Pats, and they were playing at that particular time. So I got to tell some stories about them, and it helped to tide me over until I knew a little bit more about what I was actually watching.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So you did the Jets games until 1996, and then you moved over to so your dad was a Phoenix Roadrunners announcer, you said?
Yeah, Dad had been doing the Phoenix Roadrunners, and then they changed. They were bought out by an outfit from Seattle, and they went into the WHA, and that didn't work out so well. So Dad was still down in Phoenix when I got there, but he wasn't doing hockey anymore.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So do you kind of feel like you followed?
Well, it is kind of funny, It was in 1959. My dad left Winnipeg to go to Yorkton to broadcast hockey.
Yeah.
1979, I left Yorkton to go to Winnipeg to broadcast hockey. So, and then we both wound up doing it in Phoenix, and so it did kind of work out in a funny way.
Yeah. And your story, if you don't mind, can you tell the story about how you got the job in Phoenix? Because I thought that was one of my favorite parts of the book.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was
I'm not trying to give away the whole book here.
No,
but
no. I don't mind
ones.
telling the story. I'm just trying to think back. It was just a situation where the Jets were pulling out, and I had no job, and I had to do something. And what am I going to do? And so the obvious solution would be to go to Phoenix and be the voice of the Coyotes. So I can remember getting on the plane. I got a plane almost immediately, and I flew down all the way to Minneapolis and then all the way to Phoenix. I've never concentrated so hard in my life. I kept asking myself, okay, I'm going to walk in. I'm going to meet this guy. He's going to ask me why I deserve to do these games. So I thought of answers to every conceivable question he could ask me. And then when I did get there, I went the next morning, I went to the Coyotes office, which at that time was downtown Phoenix. And I saw a receptionist there, and I said, is Sean Hunter in? And she said, yes, he is. Have you got an appointment? Well, I knew with the way she said it, if I didn't have an appointment, I wasn't going to get to see the man. So I said, to heck with it. I barged right by her, burst into his office, and I said to Sean Hunter, who looked at me like this, he said, there's only one person for the voice of the Phoenix Coyotes, and you're looking at him. And he said, who the hell are you? so then
security.
And fortunately, because I had rehearsed on the plane all the way through, no matter what he asked me, I had a brilliant answer for it. And I could tell I was impressing him. And then we went down to his car because he was catching a flight to Denver. And all the way down the elevator, and as he's pulling away in the car, I was still talking. I wouldn't stop talking. And so I kind of had a feeling that I impressed him. And sure enough, a week later, because it could have backfired. He could have said, nobody walks into my office like that. You get the heck out of there.
Yeah.
But
you're intimidating. How tall are you?
Well, at that time I was 6'3".
So you're still 6'3".
Yeah.
So you're an intimidating guy, and he's sitting at his desk, right? So if you came over,
and he's not a big man.
And with your voice too.
Yeah. But I went in bold, and it worked.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What's so fast forward, the Winnipeg Jets get announced 12 years ago as coming back to the NHL with the Winnipeg Jets, the current Winnipeg Jets, and for me personally, there's never been anyone like you to announce games for the Jets. Whatever they have now is very good, but it's not the same. I always thought that your level of calling games was higher and above than what we have been used to.
Thank you.
I never understood why you weren't given consideration for the job when the team came back here. Do you have any ideas on that?
My only idea on that is what had to be one of two things. Either they just didn't like me, or I think the reason was they were trying to get away from the old Jets. They wanted their own thing. They didn't want to be tied in. They didn't want to call the team the Winnipeg Jets. Mark Chippen did not want to call them the Jets initially. And it was people demanding, and that's what people wanted, so that's what he went with. And I guess going back to me would have been another step toward the past, and I think they were trying to bury that. And
they're trying to carve their own niche type of thing.
Yeah. And I understand it. I was disappointed by it.
Yeah.
And as a result, I didn't watch any games for the first few years. I've just begun watching them now.
Yeah.
Because I really wanted to do them, but
you didn't miss anything in the first few years.
No, you know what though? You got to remember, I did the Winnipeg Jets when they went 30 games without a win. Yeah. So I mean, nothing they could have not established would have been a surprise to me, or anything I wouldn't have identified with.
That's something that fans forget about here. Like, obviously, we weren't old enough to know that kind of stuff, but there was a time that were really dark years in Winnipeg that had really bad teams until they started making some trades and drafting, and they got their guy with Dave Babich in the draft that one year that they really wanted. They got Howard Chuck, I think the year after or 2 years later.
Yeah, Dale came the year after, because they went from the worst team ever with that 30-game winless string to the most improved team ever the following year. When in 80-game season, they improved by 48 points. They went from 32 points to 80.
Yeah.
So, and that was with the infusion of Dale Howardchuk and Paul McLean and Eddie Stanowski and Doug Sotard and Serge Savard. So there was a lot of really good additions to that team. Tom Watt was named the new head coach at that time.
Was he coach of the year that year?
He was. Yeah. Deservedly so.
When the WHA folded and there was that dispersal draft, and we weren't allowed to keep that team intact. Do you think, given that team staying together as a unit, would have competed against the NHL teams of that that year or that series of years?
I don't think there's any doubt about it.
Yeah.
I mean, they were, and I asked a lot of people that same question, and so did Fryer.
Yeah.
I remember when Bobby Hull was still around, and we did a radio show with Bobby Hull and Anders Hedberg and Ulf Nilsson about 5 years ago, and I asked them that question.
Yeah.
And all three of them said, yes, we would have competed with the Montreal Canadiens that year. And that was the Canadian team that only lost 8 games. That was the best team they ever had, probably, at least since Howie Morenz or Rocket Richard. So, but Bobby Hull and Ulf Nilsson both said that they thought the Canadians were better on the blue line, but that they were equal to them in every other way. So, no, I mean, they may not have won the series had they had a series with them, but they certainly would have been a top 5 team in the NHL.
It would have been cool to see the winner of the WHA play the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, but you got to realize the Canadians would have had everything to lose and absolutely nothing to gain.
And the NHL would have too.
Than the NHL, so they're not going to run that risk.
Yeah,
that would have been a total humiliation if they'd have done that and lost to the Jets.
Well, we talked about this last week, whereas the NHL didn't really want those 4 teams. That was just their price to pay to fold the WHA. And since then, the Hartford's gone, Quebec's gone, Winnipeg left, and then since they got the Atlanta Thrashers, and you could argue that the Edmonton Oilers are only here because of the success they had with Gretzky and Messi and Curry, etc. Right?
Yeah, well, it was a way of folding the league. It was a hostile takeover, really.
Yeah, just to get those players into the NHL and get those players.
Yeah, because if you remember the draft too, I mean, the WHA teams not only didn't get to protect many players, but they also got the last pick of the draft. And,
they were the last 4 picks.
So, I mean, the Jets walked into that with they got to protect 2 goaltenders, and they got to protect Morris Lukowich and Scott Campbell. If I remember correctly, were the 2 they did. There was a few people that were left over that they managed to hold on to a little bit later on. That would have been, I guess, Willie Lindstrom and Peter Sullivan and a few others. But as far as overall talent was concerned, no, they were down a few quarts.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a conspiracy theory question. I hope you don't mind. We do a little thing. We do different things in the podcast. We've talked about. Have you ever heard of the Mandela effect?
Yes.
Yeah. So we've talked about the Mandela effect. We talk about like just random things, and I brought this up a couple times on the podcast. You were saying how the Canadians were winning. We knew that the Oilers were winning. The Jets were super competitive. The Flames were super competitive. The Oilers won a whole bunch of years. The Flames won. The Oilers won. And then there was a lockout year. The Montreal Canadiens came back. Or the Montreal Canadiens won the Stanley Cup in 94, correct?
That was the year that Patrick was in goal.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely phenomenal. They went overtime 10 times and they won all 10 games.
Yeah.
And that'll never be done again.
So that was the last time a Canadian team won. So here's my conspiracy theory question for you.
Okay.
That was also the year that Bettman took over the NHL, almost like mid-season that year. And then we haven't won a Stanley Cup in Canada since then. My conspiracy theory question is, do you think they're related? And if you don't want to answer, that's fine.
No, I think it's a coincidence more than anything. But one of the things that happened is obviously the financial part of it, because the Canadian dollar got involved there, and there's a lot more money in New York than there is in Winnipeg and Calgary. Let's face it. But no, I think it was more coincidence than anything else, and the American dollar had a lot to do with it, and. I don't think for a minute that Gary Bettman's a big fan of Canada.
Yeah,
but I don't think for a minute either that it's a conspiracy.
Well,
I mean, they got Connor McDavid in Edmonton. So
Edmonton got every #1 draft.
Yeah. So I mean, it's.
And the question is how long he's going to stay there, right? Speaking of, and I'm on the same page with you. I don't think there's a conspiracy. I think it's Canadian dollar. Bettman was brought in to stabilize the league. Money-wise, they're very stable. They make a lot of money. And there's so much taxes in Canada. It's hard for Canadian players to want to play here. There's a story, Tavares, in the news right now where he's in court against the Canadian government because they want to take 38% of some signing bonus, some $50 million signing bonus. And he's like, no.
Those are the kind of problems we should all have, right?
Yes, but again, if you're in Florida, if you play for the Panthers or you pay for the Lightning, that's not 38%. It's not 13%. It might be 2%. Right, or 1 or 0. So, it doesn't matter how much money you make; you want to keep it all.
Yeah. Well, But there's another way of looking at it too. If you take the contracts that Hellebuck and Scheifele signed, they call them $8.5 million US. That's $11.5 million in Canada, and that's the money they're spending while they're here. So there might be higher taxes, but there's also more money to be spent. So it's I don't know how you relate it really. It's
the cost of living here is also way lower than Florida.
It costs less certainly than New York. I know when I traveled with different hockey teams, we got more per diem when we went to New York than we did anywhere else. Because just a simple hamburger in those days, where it was $2 somewhere else, was $10 there. So but those guys don't worry about stuff like that. They're driving Lamborghinis no matter where they're playing.
Speaking of traveling and following the team or calling the team, what was your favorite city to call a game for the Jets in on the road?
Well, I always liked going to Montreal. A great place. The Forum was something special to go into, and it was the way I kind of had envisioned it when I was watching it in black and white as a kid. But Chicago Stadium had an atmosphere unlike any other. Just the sound and the way it carried, and the organ they would play, and the guy who sang the anthem was phenomenal. And the whole building would shake, and they would sing, and it got you going. It really got you going. So, and Boston was good. And in later years, I really enjoyed going to Nashville. I think it was more for what was going on in town than at the rink. But in Vancouver was always fun to go to, because I always liked the city, and I got my brothers there. So there were lots of places I really enjoyed going to. And it was funny, because a lot of the players used to look forward to going to Toronto. I never looked forward to going to Toronto. No. I was all by myself whenever we went, because they all knew people there. So many of them were from there, or they played with people there, or had been with the media with people. I didn't know anybody there. I would go to a movie by myself or something in Toronto. And so that was probably the place that I didn't enjoy the most. But and I didn't like New Jersey either, for the simple fact I couldn't see the game. They had me so far away.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. The
vantage broadcast booth?
New Jersey was the worst in those days. And there were times in San Jose, too. San Jose could be, you never knew. Sometimes they would put you way up in the rafters, and other times they would give you a great seat. It all depended, I guess, on how many broadcasts were being done and how significant they thought you were.
What was it like broadcasting at the Civic Center in Ottawa?
Oh, that was good. That was close to the ice.
Because you were on, was it on the wall?
But it seemed to me, though, that you had to open up a
glass.
Yeah, like you're in a cupboard. You had to open up this door and stick your head through. And the color man had his own cupboard door, too. So it was kind of a different feel there. But
kind of old school.
Yeah, it was. I like going to the old, smaller rinks. Like the one they got now in Phoenix. I would love to do a broadcast out of a building like that.
And the little one,
because it's great when you're close to the ice. I had the opportunity to do some junior hockey. You can hear people talking to one another, and you're close to the action. And it was that way in the Boston Garden. You were close to the action, and to a degree, the Montreal Forum. And I always thought when we were doing games at the old Winnipeg Arena, that I had the best seat in the entire NHL. I loved the broadcast location there. It was right over center ice, the way that the catwalk took you there to the overhanging booth, and it was just a perfect spot.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I always looked at the catwalk in the old Winnipeg Arena. It always scared me, right? Because you would see because in the upper deck, it was such a deep, incline, right? So you're sitting there, but you look straight across and you see the guys walking across the catwalk getting into that booth, and I'm like, man, that's just
it was at the Pacific Coliseum in Vancouver, though. That was a catwalk.
Yeah,
we used to invite people to be our guests in intermissions, and lots of times they wouldn't show up
because they wouldn't cross.
They wouldn't cross because you had to walk right over the ice, and it was wooden, and it had knotholes in it. So you'd be walking and you could see the ice. It didn't bother me, and it didn't bother some people. But I remember we had a guest. I can't remember who it was. One time he said, "How am I going to get out of here? I can't go back." There's only one way back. We had to basically hold his hand to take him back across when the game was over. He stayed with us for the rest of the game.
He just hung out.
Yeah, it was different, but. Yeah, and another thing I remember about Pacific Coliseum in Vancouver, remember the voice Tom McVie had?
Yeah.
I could hear him with the headset on. I could hear him bellowing to his team. He was on the other side of the ice, I don't know, a couple hundred feet away. It didn't matter. You could hear him.
Yeah.
I mean, the building at times was quiet, I guess, but He had an incredible voice.
We actually went to Vancouver, and I had no idea that Pacific Coliseum was still there and being used for games. So you could walk on the catwalk right now if you wanted to go take a flight.
Yeah. And Old Maple Leaf Gardens is still there. They're using it. It's half a grocery store and a half a rink underneath it now.
Yeah.
They kept the ice plants. There's some, I think, what was there one in Montreal too?
There's one. The Cow Palace is still there in San Jose too. It's in San Francisco. I didn't realize that either. Yeah. And then what were we saying?
Montreal's still there?
No idea.
The Forum?
Yeah. Didn't we say we were going to walk to it after the game? And we were like, "Oh, that's too far. We're not going to go all the way there."
I don't remember that.
I'm pretty sure
I don't know if it's. I don't know if it's there or not.
No, Olympic Stadium is Olympic Stadium that was still there. I think.
Yeah. So they don't make arenas like they used to, though. Like I don't feel like they're as like loud and obnoxious as they used to be.
But it's because everything was a tin box. Like the Winnipeg Arena was one big tin box with very little exit ways or entryways, and it was one big, it was square, just like the Chicago Forum or Chicago Stadium. One tin box. The sound couldn't go.
Well, and all the people were located in seats.
Yeah.
Now there's so many private boxes that kind of separates everybody, and so I suppose that it would affect the sound in the building.
The roof,
but there's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing like the atmosphere at the Winnipeg Arena when we had those whiteouts there.
Did that compare to the Chicago Stadium for sound? Like, what was the loudest arena that you would say?
Regular season, the loudest arena was Chicago Stadium, although San Jose back in the day was pretty loud too.
Yeah.
And but at playoff time, there was nothing as loud as the Winnipeg Arena. Not that I encountered anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, the Winnipeg Arena, I only got to go to one playoff game. It was I think it was 88 against the Oilers. And I got to sit front row in the upper deck. And I always said like that was the best seat in the arena because you're like sitting on top of the ice basically, right?
Yeah.
You could see everything happening. And I'm guessing that was like you doing play-by-play, you got to sit in the best seat in the arena a lot of the time.
At the Winnipeg Arena in particular, it was just the vantage point was phenomenal.
Yeah.
You couldn't miss anything. You could see the whole ice and right hanging over center and looking straight down. It was good. It was really good.
I remember in 1990, and I was 14 years old, and my friends and I got our face painted with Jets blue and red, and we went to that game, triple overtime game, and Dave Ellett scored from the point, and the place, I've never heard anything so loud in my entire life when Ellett scored up 3-1. We're like driving home and swerving around Edmonton Oilers fans and, trying to knock a couple of them off. And that was the high points of my Jets fandom. And of course, I don't want to talk about what happened after that, but I'll always remember that's my number one memory of being a Jet fan.
That brings up some strange conversations at home because we had a strange situation happen there. My son was quite young at the time, and he was at the game with his mother. And now it was a school night. So after the first overtime, she insisted they go home. Luke is still upset about it. I think he was 8 years old or something like. He still gives it to her about that. So they get home and they got the radio on, and just as they pull into the garage, they hear me say, "He scores!" Jets win. Yeah. So there's been some banter about that over the years.
I remember. I was sent to bed early in the final game against Calgary when we finished that series off. I can't remember which year it was, and I woke up and we have good news and bad news. The good news is we won the series. Oh, great! What's the bad news? Howard Chuck got cross-checked in the ribs.
Was that McCowan?
Yeah,
Jamie McCowan.
Yeah, Jamie McCowan. Actually, Dale kind of leaped too. It was McCowan cross-checked him. There's no question, but Dale jumped as he often did when he crossed the blue line and. It was a really bad.
So it got him right underneath.
Yeah, it got him right in the rib cage, and it was cracked ribs, which I guess is the equivalent of broken ones. You can't breathe.
Yeah,
you can't breathe. You can't play hockey.
Yeah, exactly. I remember we went to hometown hockey. I think it was the first year hometown hockey came to Winnipeg. It was in Selkirk actually, and Jamie McCowan was one of the guys that they brought to sign autographs, and I'm like, this is just bad PR. Like, why would you bring Jamie McCowan?
Yeah, he was the villain there for a while in Winnipeg, for sure. Yeah,
he wasn't liked. But but speaking of Winnipeg, so players you saw, like you were saying, Hellebuck signed, Scheifele signed. Players are signing in Winnipeg long term for the most part. You talked about Mario Marois in one of the chapters about how he was not happy about coming to Winnipeg originally, and then he lived here and he became a Winnipegger essentially, right?
Yeah, he was a grouch.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, actually, that was his persona too. He put on the grouch thing like Randy Carlyle did, or like Friar Nicholson did.
Yeah.
And underneath, though, he was a pretty good guy. Mario was, but that first year he was unhappy. He didn't want to leave Quebec. It was where that was his home. He was the captain of the Nordique. I can understand it.
Yeah.
And he got traded away. You feel like you're rejected. And but then once he got to appreciate Winnipeg, he didn't want to leave. And of course, he was upset when they traded him, and they traded him back to Quebec City.
They traded him right
back. Total reversal.
Yeah.
Remind me before you go on. Who was he traded for? I forget.
Was it Robert Picard? One of the deals was, I think it was for Picard.
Like when you say that they sent him back, who you got traded?
No, at the beginning when he came to Winnipeg.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't remember.
And he came. I can't think of it.
But that was when the Jets were trying to make a run that year, right?
Gord Donnelly was involved in there somehow.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, so he changed his mind and liked Winnipeg. You lived here, you grew up in Saskatchewan and that type of thing, and you moved to Phoenix for the Coyotes, but now you're back. What brings you?
Oh, I love the winter.
Yeah.
No, it's home, and it's where our sons are, our grandkids are. And also, I was only 57 when I left Phoenix, so I still had intentions of working, and I was only licensed to do what I was doing.
You didn't knock down the door here, though?
No, I didn't knock down the door. Maybe I should have. Maybe that would have worked. But no, I didn't. I didn't take that. You
didn't take that approach.
That approach. This particular. I kind of thought they knew who I was, and that if they wanted me, they'd let me know. I did let them know that I was interested. Obviously, I had to do that. And but that didn't work out.
But Winnipeg is a great place. Like we talk about it, that some people that watch aren't from Winnipeg, right? So they wouldn't know what it's like here. But a lot of people choose Winnipeg as their home afterwards. Like Scheifele and Hellebuck have signed for an 8-year deal, and it seems like the Jets have been able to sign these players. Do you think it's a draw to the organization, or do you think it's a draw to like cost of living, or just to winning right now?
I think it's a draw to the organization, and I think it's a draw to winning. I can recall when the Jets had some good teams back in the mid '80s, and there were a lot of people who wanted to play for that team when they had Dale and McLean and Boschman and Steen and the whole works of them. It was a popular landing spot. There were people who wanted to play there. I knew of a couple. In fact, one guy, and I don't think he'll mind me. Mind you, he was from Winnipeg. Was what's the heck's his name now? He played with the Calgary Flames. Anyway, I'll get back to that. But so they want to win. Players want to win, and so if they can win a Stanley Cup in Winnipeg, it might sound a lot better than Phoenix, and where they, it's up to the individual. Some guys like the sun.
Yeah.
Some guys. I remember one time we went on a hockey trip from Phoenix. And I can still recalling Wayne Gretzky, who was the coach at that time, standing at the elevator and saying, "I've never seen this before." One of the players brought his clubs on a road trip. And it was, I guess, about March or April. We were playing a game in Edmonton, and the guy had brought his clubs with him, and they were sitting outside the elevator. So I don't know who it was. I never did find out. I had a suspicion. I don't know who it was. But, so...
Yeah, well, and there's great golfing in Phoenix.
Yeah, but I don't know. They were bringing their clubs to Edmonton. I can't quite figure that out.
in the middle of February. So switching gears a little bit, you were in the movie Goon. Is that correct? You played the play-by-play individual, correct?
Yeah,
what was it like in that playing something you did for a living, but in a movie form?
It was fun. Yeah, I totally enjoyed it. And it was something different to do. You don't normally have scripted play-by-play.
Yeah.
So there was a certain amount of that, but they gave me liberties. They said, this is just a guide. You can go off in your own little way as you want. I found that the toughest part was trying to invent names as you're going along, because you find your mind will go, if you say Green, the next thing's going to come to mind is going to be Brown. You say Smith, the next thing's going to come to Jones. So you're trying to think of new names. Well, they flew me to Toronto eventually to do another take about some more play-by-play, and I was on the plane home from Toronto, and I thought, you dumbbell. I figured out what I should have done, but it was too late. I should have thought about all my old high school buddies.
Yeah.
They would have, I could have had, here's Schindel to Ford to Golden and, to Balako, but I didn't think of it in time.
Yeah.
And so meanwhile, I'm trying to invent names as I'm going along. Anyway, that was the hardest part.
Yeah.
That actually brings me a memory just when you said that. I remember for a year and a half, I used to think that Peter Tagnelli and Eddie were a defense pairing, and they were two people. And then it took me literally like 18 months to figure out they were one person.
I was the exact same way, and I actually thought they were two people until my dad brought me home a Tagley and Eddie stick.
You thought it was Tagley and
Eddie?
Yes.
Oh,
Tagley,
like a defense
Peter.
Eddie.
It could have been three people: Peter, Tagley, and Eddie.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was Tagley and Eddie, and I'm like, these guys are awesome together. They're always together. They're like passing well.
No, they're both healthy. They're on the ice at the same time.
But that's the power of radio, right?
Yeah, you can't see it.
Because we're not watching these games.
Yeah, you picture somebody and you don't know what they look like, but you got your own image of them. Yeah, I think radio is a lot of fun because you paint a picture.
Yeah,
and you're totally on your own. You don't have somebody in your ear saying, well, we'd like you to talk now about the ticket sales that are coming up or a particular player that maybe you hadn't been too impressed by in that game.
Yeah.
You want to talk about somebody else, which you could do on radio because you picked your own spots.
Yeah, and you talked about in your book how a lot of the announcers now are talking about stats all the time.
Yeah.
And they're talking about, like, this player has gone 5 games without a goal, and every player that goes 5 games or more has, like all that kind of weird stuff. Back in the day, you used to go more based on, like, feel of the game, if I remember correctly, right?
Well, I try to. Yeah, I always thought that if I didn't sound like I was enjoying the game,
yeah,
the people who are listening aren't going to enjoy the game.
Yeah,
it should be contagious. And so I tried to get into it. And there were some games that weren't all that exciting. And so then you have to kind of kick yourself in the butt a little bit and say, hey, you got to put on a show here, man. Get at it. So I used to do something stupid, though. I used to turn up my headset volume so it would be screaming in my ears. And now I'm paying a price for it. I got severe tinnitus as a result. But it got me more into the game. And I see disc jockeys do that. I remember when I was working on radio and I'd walk into stations, the disc jockey would have the music on so loud. You're going to regret this one day.
Yeah.
And you do. But it was a way to get into the game more if it was quiet and slow.
Yeah.
And if I was in a place like New Jersey where there was no sound, then I had to just listen to myself really loud.
Yeah. And you also say that homerism is a big problem in hockey these days with a lot of the announcers in the States. Like Fox Sports, we go down to Florida and I'll watch hockey on Fox Sports or on some of the other channels, and the homerism is like through the roof a lot of the times, right? And you said that you tried to keep it even keeled in terms of like for both teams, and you're trying to announce for both teams very similarly, right?
Yeah, I think it's part of that is being a different era too, because in my day, you were hired by the radio station or the TV station, and you did the game, and you tried to be neutral, even though obviously inside you had a cheering interest. But now, most of them are hired. A lot of are hired by the hockey team. When I was in Phoenix, I was actually an employee of the Phoenix Coyotes. That didn't change my approach. I still wanted to sound like I wasn't.
Yeah.
And fortunately, they didn't seem to mind that too much.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why that Ovechkin call that you did is literally your call, even though it was a Washington play.
Now picked up by Ovechkin. Here he comes. Ovechkin trying to drag it through him there. Oh! Scored!
Yeah, it had that goal happened in certain other buildings, the guy who called it wouldn't have been as excited as I was.
Yeah,
Right.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
And like they would have just used the Washington call, because the Washington call would have been probably the most exciting one if it wasn't yourself calling it, right? But it's a testament to yourself that they use your voice on that call for a player that isn't even your team.
Yeah, I've always been kind of flattered by that. That it's always that replay that they use, because I have heard the Washington call and there was nothing wrong with it.
Yeah,
but obviously they considered mine better, and
it drags it through. Like, who comes up with that in a second? Like, you literally, and like I said at the beginning, you have seconds to figure these things out, and drags it like this isn't even a play that you've ever seen before.
Yeah.
Right? It was great. Me and Tim were talking about it a couple episodes ago, actually. So
speaking of homerisms, I don't know if you ever caught Phil Esposito in Tampa. Have you ever heard him do a radio color?
No, actually,
you have to go on XM radio, catch a Tampa Lightning game.
It's Fox Sports, right?
Well, he does the local Tampa radio,
Tampa
whatever.
Broadcast.
And so if you want a homer, it's like Uncle Phil on his, if you can imagine, grumpy Uncle Phil on a couch doing color. It's him.
Okay.
And it's the most homer you'll ever see. It's hilarious. It's entertaining. It's that much. So, and I just thought I'd mention it because if you ever get a chance to, but
we don't get a lot of those broadcasts here, right? We have to go to the States to see them because all we get here is Sportsnet, TSN, or local, right? So we don't, and I think that some of the guys here do a good job of keeping it less homer, but you get Edmonds on the call, and you can tell the difference between a goal for us and a goal for them, right? So and you know what, to tell you the truth, Edmonds,
it's a natural thing though. It really is. I had to kind of temper myself a little bit, I suppose you would say, but only in the early days, and then it got to be totally habit,
like riding a bike.
Yeah. But there's no question, though, that you do get more excited when the team you're covering scores, especially when they're playing a playoff game against the Edmonton Oilers, the Calgary Flames.
Yeah,
it was great. It was fun to be at, and it was a great time.
Speaking of which, what was your favorite game you ever called? If you were to pick a number one, what would that be?
Well, I guess it would be the one you already mentioned when Dave Ellett scored that double overtime goal. I think we all thought that finally they were going to slay the Dragon and move on past the Edmonton Oilers. But as it turned out, they didn't win a game again. But no, that was the most exciting moment. But the Solani season was exciting from beginning to end. And the season where Dale Hawerchuk joined the team and they had that tremendous improvement. I mean, it just was such a weight lifted off everybody after what had happened the year before.
Yeah,
that there were some great times. I'm sure if you're someone from Edmonton or something, you think, well, the highlight is a double overtime game in a series you lost. I mean, because it was a little different there. Yeah. But there was a real feel for the team here, a closeness that the people had. They identified with it, and I think people got a little frustrated at times. Then they'd get excited, only be let down again, and you kept pulling for the little guy. It was like that the train, I guess, that little train.
The only problem with the Jets was they were in the division with the Oilers.
Well, yeah, because I don't think there's any question that they were one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the entire National Hockey League in 1985.
For that 1 year, that was the one.
That was their best year, and and I mentioned that in the book that I was led to believe, and a lot of people believed that they would win it all that year.
Yeah.
And of course, what happened with Dale. But in the final analysis, the biggest difference that year was Grant Fuhr played goal for Edmonton, and Brian Hayward played goal for Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And not taking anything away from Brian Hayward, although it certainly sounds like I just did. He was a National Hockey League goaltender.
Yeah.
But Grant Fuhr was an elite National Hockey League goaltender, and it was like trying to beat Patrick Waugh in a playoff game. You couldn't do it. I mean, the Oilers, of course, they had the firepower in the first 2 periods to score a bunch of goals, and then when they decided to tie things down, well, there was Fuhr.
And if you remember correctly, if Fuhr was somehow injured, they had Andy Moog behind him too.
Yeah.
So they
and Bill Ranford after that.
Yeah, that was a couple years. Yeah, that was
the last year Fuhr was there. Bill Ranford was his backup.
So
it would have been interesting, if some of the goaltenders that they had later on had been there at that time, Essenza or Habby Boulin.
Yeah.
And later on, I got to watch a great goaltender in Phoenix and Sean Burke, and you get to see people like that playing and say, wow, what a difference that kind of goaltending makes. And they're seeing it right now with Connor Hellebuck. Can you imagine Connor Hellebuck with that team?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, we were talking about, even forget the Jets. Like, the Jets didn't win the 15 years in 1.0, and now in the 12 years we haven't come close to a cup. Well, that 1 year in 2018 we kind of came close to it, but not just in Winnipeg. In the combined 27 years, you have places like Toronto, with the Maple Leafs, who have star talent, who haven't won in how many years? We talk about that all the time, right?
The 60s, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So it's been 60 some odd years, almost 70 years for Toronto. Or in basketball, you have the Sacramento Kings, 71 years. Detroit Lions in the playoffs now, where they had that big lead on San Francisco, and now they're out. They haven't won in close to 70 years too. Cleveland with the Guardians. So you have it's hard to win a championship in all leagues. Forget Winnipeg.
Well, it is, but you got to do the math too. 32 teams in a league. So if you win 3 Stanley Cups in a century, you've done really well.
Yeah.
So
that's very true.
I'm going to ask you a question that you probably don't know the answer to, but you might have a bit more insight than I or Greg does. And we talked about this last week. In 1979, when the Winnipeg Jets entered the NHL from the WHA, Wayne Gretzky was traded from the Indianapolis Racers to the Edmonton Oilers because Indianapolis needed some $700,000 or some money infusion. And there's a story that I heard that's kind of been now in mythology, where the infamous backgammon game between Michael Gabati and Peter Pocklington. Sorry, not Peter Pocklington, but the Indianapolis individual who the GM was.
Nelson Skalbania.
Nelson Skalbania. And the story, of course, and I don't know how true it was that Gabati did not play backgammon, so he lost that, and he ended up being traded to the Edmonton Oilers. Do you have any other insight as to how true that story is and how close Gretzky actually came to coming to Winnipeg?
Well, I did hear a story about a backgammon game, and I know that Barry Shinkrow talked about it, but it is so convoluted, and I've heard so many different versions of it that I don't want to even talk about it, because I don't know. I really don't know. It is something, though, that should be checked into, and you should definitely look into that. But as far as how close he came to being a Jet, Jets had first dibs.
Yeah.
Nelson Skalbania called Ben Hatskin and offered him Wayne Gretzky, and I think they wanted $100,000 for him, which was a lot of money in those days. Yep. And so Ben Hatskin, as I understand, went to his general manager at the time and asked Rudy Pillis what he thought, and Rudy Pillis apparently said, no, he's not big enough. He's not going to make it in the National Hockey League. He's too skinny. So they said, okay, and Peter Pocklington jumped on it, paid the $100,000, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how one move could have changed any franchise at that time, right?
It's true, but sometimes when you think of it, it would have been great having Gretzky here, obviously. But there's other people who wouldn't have been here if they'd had Gretzky. Yeah. They wouldn't have had the early draft picks that got them Dave Babbage and Dale Hawerchuk, by example. So it would have been a different makeup to the team. Gretzky may have been on a bit of an island here.
Yeah.
In those days. And of course, when he got to Edmonton, he wasn't, because he was there with Messier, and later Coffey came along, and they had that goaltending that you spoke of earlier. So, it was, and also Kevin Lowe was there from the early days too. So he had some talent that he was with, and he would not have had that kind of talent had he shown up in Winnipeg in 1979.
Yeah. Best goalie you ever called?
Well, that I saw on a regular basis was Grant Fuhr.
Okay.
But that I've seen...
that gave you fits calling. Like somebody who you had to call his name so many times because he's making all the saves.
Yeah, that was Grant Fuhr. Because, I mean, the Jets were so offensive in those days when they had Hawerchuk and Steen and Boschman and Smale and the 630 goal guys, Brian Mullen, Paul McLean. Dave Babbage, Randy Carlisle on the blue line. They were firing pucks at that game all night. They'd get 40 shots regularly. I remember one game I did, I think it was a playoff game, and the shots on goal at the end of the first period were 21-7 for the Jets, and the score was 3-0 Edmonton.
And that was the years of smaller pads and smaller equipment. The goalies were tiny back then. So if he's making 21 saves in a period.
It's funny, and I hesitate to tell this story because it sounds like he was bragging, but I was there and he was not bragging. He was just being factual. Grant Fuhr was a goaltending coach with the Phoenix Coyotes when I was there.
Okay.
And he and I often would have breakfast on the road. And we'd often hearken back to the days of the mid-'80s and the series that they had with Winnipeg. And he had a lot of respect for a lot of the players on the Jets, and he loved playing in Winnipeg, and obviously good reasons. He played great here. But one day I said to him, you know what the biggest difference between the mid-'80s Oilers and the mid-'80s Jets was? He looked me straight in the eye and said, the goaltending. And I said, yes. And he was just being honest. That's all. And it was totally honest. And I remember talking to Dave Ellett and Paul McLean and a lot of other people too, who were here for the Heritage thing. And they all said the same thing. Paul Coffey said the same thing. The goaltending was the biggest difference.
And Ranford played in that game. Did Fuhrer play in that game too? The Heritage game when they had the old timers?
Fuhrer was there. I don't know if he played, but he was.
He may have been golfing.
Solani looked like he could still play, and it was only like 2 years after he had already retired.
The funny thing you mentioned Fuhrer in that game where Zhamnov scored those 5 goals in that tie in LA. Fuhrer was the goaltender for the Kings. If I'm not correct, if I'm not mistaken, I believe so. Yeah,
not Rudy.
I thought it was Fuhrer. I could be wrong.
His 4th of the game, beating Grant Fuhrer, who had come on in relief for the Kings. But Zhamnov was saving his best for last.
Sent it to the blue line, and now down the right side, Zhamnov looking again. He shoots, he scores! What a move! His 5th of the game!
I didn't know if Fuhrer played for the Kings. I know he played for Buffalo, and he took Buffalo on that big run back in the day, too.
Yeah, he played with St. Louis as well.
Yeah.
Fuhrer did, so... I don't remember him playing for LA, but
I could be right. But was Gretzky with the Kings in that game?
You know, I wasn't at that game.
Right.
That was when I was doing television.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't actually see the 5-goal performance by Zhamnov because at that time we weren't doing all the games on television. So
is it weird to think that back in the day we only saw like 2 games a month on TV versus now we see every game.
Now you see every game, and
it's easy to be super critical of the team when you see every game on TV now, right? So you get a lot more criticism. Whereas when we listened to it on the radio, we thought there was 2 guys, Tagley and Eddie. Right?
Well, now the added issue is not only do you see more games, but you can complain about to millions of people on the internet at one particular time. Now, if you were upset about the Jets, you might have told 5 people at the one at the grocery store. Maybe you talked to your uncle, and then your best friend. You complained to 4 people. Now you complain to 4 million people in 5 seconds, right?
Yeah.
So,
you get your keyboard warriors giving it their thing, and
yeah. This is awesome. Well, do you have any other questions at all? I know that I want to be very cognizant of
no, I just have to say it's been an honor to talk to you. And like, I wasn't kidding before when I said, you are my childhood. You are our childhood.
Yeah.
And growing up, no voice could I associate with that than your voice. And like he said about listening to every single game, like you said, there's only a couple games on TV, so we listened to it, and we could imagine the games. And you are the reason why we could imagine so vividly everything that actually happened, whether it was in Boston or New York or Chicago. That memory sticks so much into my head and in our past, right? So it's just such a thrill to actually talk to you and see you today.
He has 2 loves. Sandberg. Well, sorry, 3. I'll include Tammy, your wife.
Better not forget Tammy.
4.
Better not tell Tammy about the 4th one.
So outside of the family, he's got 2 loves. He actually texted me this the other day, and I already knew that you were coming. And we had a clip from you talking about Dale Hawerchuk on our last podcast, and I put it in there on purpose because I knew you were coming this week, and I wanted to see his reaction.
I had no idea. We watched it. I'm complete shock.
And I put the clip in there, and he literally texts me. He's like, Keilback, or effing Keilback, he put on there, and I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, I have 2 loves, Sandberg and Keilback. So I'm like, okay, so that's a good thing.
And this was when we had already talked about me coming on.
Yeah,
that's right.
And
you had no idea.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's an honor for me to be here, and it's great to be remembered.
Yeah.
And but I always am aware of the fact that the local radio broadcaster back in those days, and I mentioned it in the book, has a tendency to be pretty popular because he is the voice you associate with growing up, and like you say, going to bed at night, and that voice in your head, and it creates a bit of a bond. So, but it's a great feeling, and I always enjoy having conversations like this with people like yourselves.
I really appreciate you saying yes, because it's easy to say no, and I know that it takes a lot.
What else would I be doing?
I don't know.
Well, you'd be getting a new bed.
Fixing your bed.
And a new TV. That's something you could be doing. So before, I cannot let this opportunity pass.
Okay, and again, I didn't let him prepare at all. So
no, I'm not prepared.
These questions.
This is just cold. Okay, I need you to do a call for me. So here's a scenario. The Jets have the power play. It's the mid to late 80s. They win the face-off, back to the point. The shot is blocked. The Edmonton Oilers scoot out on a 2-on-1. And
I'm not doing a half-hour play-by-play.
Bob Essenza makes the save. Power play. Just a scenario. You have any freedom, just like in the movie, to do whatever you want. Jets have the power play. They have a shot. It's blocked. The Edmonton Oilers come the other way, 2-on-1, and Essenza makes the save. Can you do that for us?
The Essenza save part is probably the golden.
Jets have the power play. They send out.
Just a shot blocked. Okay, you don't give them so much.
Where does the puck start?
The puck starts
at the shot.
At the point.
The one-timer.
And the shot is blocked at the point.
And then they rush on.
And it's a 2-on-1. Gretzky, you can pick anyone you want.
You mean Babbage takes a shot, it's blocked at the point, and then
that's right.
Gretzky
and Curry go down a 2-on-1, and then it's saved by Bob Essenza. Take it away.
Putting him on the spot here.
All right. Off the face-off, puck goes back to the point. Here's Babbage, a shot. That's blocked. It bounces free. 2-on-1. Here's Curry with Gretzky. Hit and go. Shot, save, rebound. Great save. Essenza, Rob Gretzky. And the Jets win in overtime.
Perfect.
That is fantastic. It's exactly what dreams are made of for hockey calls. Oh, man. I hope that didn't take too much out of you. Anyways, thanks for watching the show. We really appreciate it. And if you want, we got the book. It's called 2 Minutes for Talking to Myself. It is a great book. So many great stories in here. If you're a Jets fan, some Coyote stories too. If you're a Coyotes fan, I know there's not a ton of you guys out there, but the ones that are there are passionate. And this is such a great book. So check it out. It's available everywhere. I got Amazon. Tim got his now, so he's got to read it up. So appreciate it once again here. We love this. This has been fantastic.
All right, I'll spray a little stuff in the throat.
And then you'll be all good.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching the Greg and Tim Show podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with all your friends. Sharing is caring.